So you just returned from HRO or Gigaparts, R&L Electronics, wherever it might be, and you got yourself the Yaesu FT-70D, and now you're wondering, what do I need to know about this radio to get started? And that's exactly what I'm here to teach you. In the next 3 episodes, we're going to discuss some of the key features and shortcuts of this radio, how to manually program the radio, and how to program the radio via computer. We're also going to go into how to use the digital portion of this radio as well. Hi everybody, I'm W9FFF, and you might remember me from other Ham Radio Dude episodes such as how to program your FT4X and the technical specifications and features of the Yaesu FT-65. And the only difference with this video is this is going to be a 3 or 4 part video, whereas before I try to cram it all in one. And I'm going to do that so it's easier for people to find the information when they're looking online. Now with that too, if you get lost or confused, I'm going too fast, don't forget you could always stop the video or rewind it and watch it again. And of course, if you do like this video, please consider sharing it, but also subscribing to the channel. Currently, 83% of the people watching these videos are not subscribed to the channel. So in this episode, we're going to discuss some of the shortcuts to this radio, but we're also going to manually program the radio for some analog channel. The first thing I'm going to do is reset my radio to factory defaults. Now, you might not need to do this one step, but the reason I do it is because I already have stuff programmed in here, and I want to make this so we're starting from scratch. So in order to go ahead and reset this radio to factory defaults, you need to hold down these 3 buttons here, Mode, HM/RV, and AMS. Now, it can be tricky to kind of hold them down and operate everything else here at the same time, but there is a power button on the side too. So as you're holding those 3 down, you hit the power button, and now you're going to see this little display message, all reset. What do we have to do right here? Well, that's simple. All we need to do now is hit the F key. And now it says enter, and it should say call sign. Now we're on the same page, and you see it's asking for a call sign, so let's go ahead and put that in right now. I'm W9FFF, which means I would have to hit W9 and then FFF using 99333 on the keypad here. So what I can do, though, is I could hit W, and then I use my first letter as W, but how do I get to the next letter? And if you just hit this little band button, it'll bring you to letter 2, where I could hit 9. But instead of actually typing 4 times or 5 times the 9, I could just go like this and use the the dial knob up top to add certain things. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, W9. And then I'm going to hit the band button to go to the letter 3. And I can hit that once and I can go over twice. And then the band button F. And then the band button F. So as you can see, there's 2 ways you could do it. You could tap the keypad as many times as you need to get to the letters you want or the numbers, or you could tap it once and you could use the dial knob. So now that I have W9FFF in here, let's go ahead and hit the V/M button, and it brings us to the main Yaesu FT-70D screen. Now that we're actually at the main menu of this radio, I figured it would probably be good to go over some of the nomenclature of this radio. And so what you have here is the Yaesu FT-70D. And I want to start on the left side of the radio. There's 4 buttons. Starting at the top, there's the push to talk button, which is the button you're going to use to key down the radio when you're ready to talk. If you're not licensed, don't touch that button. However, the next button is the monitor or the T-call button, and that just allows you to be able to kind of monitor what's going on that frequency here. And so basically, I broke the squelch to be able to hear if there's a signal that maybe I can't be able to hear otherwise. Going 1 more down is the volume button. And so if you hold down the volume button here and use the dial knob, which is on top here, you could actually adjust your volume. If you do not hold down the volume button while you do it, you're actually going to change your frequencies. So you could change the frequencies with the dial knob, but you could also change the volume. And finally, the first one I should have started with is the power button. And you could hold down the power button for 2 seconds to turn the radio off or to turn it back on. But this also serves as a lock button, so if you just tap the radio or the button once, it's going to lock the radio, and vice versa. If you tap it once, it'll unlock the radio as well. So on the front of the radio, you do have a couple of things, and we're going to get into the details a little bit later, but I just want to make it aware that you do have your standard keypad on here. You have a function button, which is going to be pretty important, and then you have a group monitor button. And finally, on the side, you have a spot for an external microphone and speaker, as well as a data cable or a USB cable. And then finally, you have your DC in, which allows you to run your radio or power your radio, but also charges your battery. And I do want to go back to the function button here real quick. So this function button actually works in a pretty cool way. So as you can see above your keypads, like for example, number 1 says TXPO. And if you were to tap the function button and then hit 1, you could set your power to high, low, or mid, and so forth. So if you were in a memory channel or not, you could hit or tap the function button and hit 2, and it'll actually scan the frequencies for you. Now, to get out of the scan mode, whatever time you're in it, you could just tap that push to talk, and it takes you out of scan mode. And we can continue on, but I think you're going to understand all these as we go on. But now we kind of have an idea that that function button works as a tap, and then it accesses shortcuts from the keypad. And the only other thing to know about that function button is if you hold it down for about 1.5 seconds, it'll bring you into what I call the main menu. And there's about 65 different options, 64 different options in this radio. Don't worry, we're going to get to some of the most important ones here shortly. Let's get started with programming a frequency of a repeater into this radio. So now I have 2 frequencies above me. I encourage you to go ahead and go online to find what frequencies are going to work for you in your area. You could use repeaterbook.com or whatever repeater directory works best for you. Let's go ahead and exit this main menu here by just holding down the function. And now we're back on the main screen here. There are a couple different modes to this radio, and we're going to go discuss those here real quick. The V and M button means the VFO or the memory mode button. So right now, it would appear that we're in VFO mode. And the reason I know that is there's no number next to this frequency here. And if I use the dial pad, the dial knob, I could change frequencies. However, if I hit the VFO memory button, now I'm in memory mode. And I know that because there's a 1 here. And if I go left and right, I currently don't switch any frequencies. And the reason for that is we don't have any frequencies inputted. So for this part of the tutorial, we're going to go ahead and we're going to go back into VFO mode. And as you'll see here, I'm on the frequency 145.320. And I mentioned you could use this dial knob to find the repeater frequency that you want. But you could also just type in your first frequency via the keypad. And that's what I'm going to do, 145.330. And here I am, 145.330. The next thing to set is going to be the offset. And the thing with the Yaesu FT-70s is by default, automatic repeater shift is enabled. So if you're on a common frequency, this might not even be a problem. But I do want to show you a couple things. The first thing is you'll already notice that there's a minus sign up here, which means that because automatic repeater shift is automatically enabled, it already knows that since this is a common frequency, it's going to use a negative offset. However, if we hold down the function key to go into the main menu, and you can use this dial knob to scroll different menu options, go to 45. It's automatic repeater shift. And if you tap the function button there, you'll see that it's on. If for whatever reason you didn't want this to be on, you could just hit it as off. But I am going to leave it as on for now, and then I'm going to tap the function key, which brings us back to the main menu. Now, if you go up to 46, it's repeater frequency. And so if you had a repeater offset that wasn't quite 0.6, whatever it might be, you could actually tap that function button and you could change it here and then tap the function button and it'll save it for that frequency. Now I'm going to actually go in and I'm going to change this back to -6 or 0.6 rather. And like I mentioned, it's already knowing that it's a negative offset here. And if for whatever reason this frequency wasn't a negative offset and you needed to change it, you could actually just tap the function button and go down to 0. And you could change it to a negative or a positive offset from there. I'm going to leave it on negative, and now I'm just going to tap the function button to get back to the main menu. So we have our frequency programmed. We know that the offset is -0.6, and it is programmed. And now we need to do the CTCSS or the PL tone. In order to access that, you're just going to hit function, and then you're going to hit squelch type. You're going to see that our squelch type is listed as off. But if we're putting in a CTCSS tone, we need to set this to tone. Now, there are other options in there, such as TSQL and DCS and so forth. But right now, for this tutorial, we're worried about tone. So we set it to tone. You'll see there's a T on the radio now, and then we tap that function key. The T is now on the radio, so we know we have the frequency, we have an offset set, and now we have a T-tone set, but we don't have the actual tone itself set. So if you tap the F key again, and then you go to code number 6, you'll see 100 hertz. Well, I need 107.2, so I'm just going to scroll to 107.2, and then I'm going to tap function. Again, if this is too much, you could always pause the video, rewind it, and watch it again. I do want to make note of one more thing, though, before we actually hard set this frequency into the radio, and that's this FM right here. If you were to tap mode, it would change you to a digital mode. Now, that's not going to work for this analog repeater, so I'm going to hit mode again and make sure I'm in FM mode. Here I am, I have 145.330, I have a negative offset, I have my T-tone, and then I'm in FM mode. The only other two things to do are to test this frequency and then to program it. Now to test this frequency, all I'm going to do is I'm going to identify with my call sign as I use the push to talk to key up. And I'm going to say my call sign and then testing and then my call sign and clear. So it's going to be W9FFF testing and W9FFF clear. Now that was simple, but you might have some problems. So some of the most common problems you're going to see here all revolve around what's above me and then that mode button. Make sure you're not in that digital mode if you're on an analog repeater, and vice versa. If you're on an analog repeater, make sure you should be on digital because that could have an effect on things. But then also make sure that you have all this information above correct, because if you don't have this information correct, you might be able to receive, but you might not be able to transmit. And most of the times the problem has to do with the tone or with the offset. Now that we have all the information inputted in the radio and we've confirmed it works, let's go ahead and actually hard set it into a memory channel. We could do that by holding down the V/M button for about 1.5 seconds to 2 seconds. And you'll know it's actually ready to accept programming when you see a flashing F and you see a channel number. If I use the dial knob, I could change what memory channel I save this to, but for the sake of this tutorial, I'm just going to use memory channel 1 and memory channel 2 for UHF. So now you'll see the flashing F right here, and what that basically means is it's still preparing for your instructions, essentially, to get this thing programmed. So all you got to do here is if you find the channel you want, 1, and you tap V/M one more time, it's going to ask you, do you want to write it? And just tap V/M again. And then you'll get almost a blank screen that asks you for something, but you don't know what. The flashing F and the flashing underscore right above it. It's actually asking you for the call sign. So, or whatever you want to name this memory channel. It could be N9HEPV, so you know it's VHF. It could just be N9HEP. It could pretty much be whatever you want. But for the sake of this tutorial, we're just going to do N9HEP. So I hit N, and then what happens if I hit 9 right here? Oh, okay, cool. I can go to the next one. And I missed 9, so I got to go through it again. And here's the reason I can't hit the back or the dial knob right here, because it's not going to go back to 9. It's actually going to try to go back through the alphabet, so that doesn't work very well for me. And as you can see, it could take a really long time to find the 9 in that case. And then the next one's going to be H. So I could also tap the band button to move to the next spot, and then we got to find H. And then I could actually just do it again this way. I don't have to hit the band button, but I wanted you to know that in case you ever did want like a space in your memory channel. And then finally the P. N9HEP. Great, looks good, but now what? Well, simply just go ahead and hold down the V/M button, and now it's in the memory. But how do we know that? Okay, because we're back in VFO mode again, right? We'll just tap the memory button. Now all of a sudden we see that channel 1 is N9HEP. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do a time lapse for the next frequency that I'm putting in. All right, so what you're going to see here is I went ahead and I input the UHF frequency for the N9HEP repeater in here. I had a couple of hiccups where I kept hitting the mode button instead of the function button. But the key is I got everything right, and I did test it off camera that it was working. Okay, for the sake of this tutorial, I went ahead and I got everything programmed, but I did make a mistake intentionally. And what you're going to see here is that it's now set to DN. So remember, I was hitting that mode button so many times while I was doing the tutorial that I changed the mode from FM to digital, and now I have in my radio a UHF repeater set for digital. It's just not going to work because this is an analog repeater. What do I have to do to fix this? Well, it's really easy. Just tap that mode button. If I tap the mode button, now it shows memory channel 2 is FM. But if I turn the radio off and I turn it back on, that's not going to save. So hold down the V/M button. And now it's going to ask you, hey, which memory channel do you want to save it into? And I do have something in 3 now as well. That's why it's asking for 4. But I'll go to 2, and then I'll hold down the V/M button. And it'll say, hey, you want to write this or overwrite this? And I'm going to say, yeah, overwrite it. And then I'm going to hold down the V/M button because N9HEP is already set. And all of a sudden, here we are. Channel 2 shows FM. And if I turn the radio off and I turn it back on, the settings did stay. And I do want to make note, too, that if you were to put in simplex frequencies, so for example, if you went to VFO mode and, 146.520, if you're in the VFO mode here, all of a sudden you see that there still is a T-tone, but the negative offset went away. Again, that's because you have automatic repeater shift enabled, which knows that this is a simplex frequency and there shouldn't be an offset. But you still might run into issues with that T code. because generally simplex, I mean, you could have a T code and everything, but generally simplex, you wouldn't really need one. So let's tap that function button and go to the squelch type and then just turn the code off. So now all of a sudden that T is gone, which means the 107.2 or 114, whatever code we might have put in there or whatever tone we might have put in there will no longer transmit because the squelch type is off. And then of course you could save this one as well if you wanted to. And I would just probably save it as the actual frequency listed. Now you have a couple of frequencies programmed into memory mode on here, and you do know how to check the frequencies, but maybe you just want to scan. All you have to do is tap that function key and hit 2. And now it's scanning between these 3 channels. However, there could be a time where you're just sick and tired of hearing from one of these frequencies. And the first thing you need to do is get out of scan mode, which you could tap the push to talk or you could hit the V/M button. I'll just hit the push to talk here and you can see it stopped. Now that the scan has stopped, if you tap the function button and then hit the 9 button, you'll see that there's a little play arrow that's lit solid next to or above 3, which means now on the next scan, it's going to skip this channel. As you can see here, it's just going between 1 and 2, and the reason for that obviously is, like I said, we skipped the channel. But now if you wanted to unskip the channel, just hit that push to talk again, find the channel, channel 3, and then do the same thing. Tap function and then skip. Right now you'll see a flashing arrow, and I'll get to that in just a moment. But then if you hit function and skip one more time, the arrow will go away. And then if you scan, you can scan, here we go, all 3 frequencies or all 3 channels. Okay, so I cut away for just a minute and I added one more memory channel, and it's going to be NOAA weather radio. And the reason for that is I want to show you what that other flashing button does. Again, if you hit the function button and you hit the skip button, it's going to give you that little skip icon. But if you do it one more time, it flashes. And what that means is you're adding this to a list of frequencies to include in your scan. Now, there must be at least 3 frequencies in order for this to work. So let's go ahead and add 1, 2, and 3 to the scan list. Excuse me. Here we go. And then 3. There you go. So now you'll see that that's flashing, and that's flashing. But NOAA weather radio doesn't have anything next to it. Now if we scan, oops, I hit mode again. I got to stop hitting that mode button, I'll tell you. Now if we scan, you'll notice that NOAA weather radio isn't included. And you might ask yourself, why not just skip NOAA weather radio? Well, you might have 1,000 frequencies. And instead of going in and saying, skip this one, skip that one, skip that one, you could say, I only want to scan these 3 frequencies. And it makes it a lot easier. So that's a really nice feature of this radio. I'm going to go ahead and stop the scan here. We're on channel 1 for now. That's fine. Like I mentioned earlier, you could adjust the volume by holding down the volume knob and bringing it down. And I'm just going to bring it down because there's bound to be some kind of traffic on this frequency at some point. I do want to mention that you could actually change the bands by hitting the band button. And what you're going to see is no bank. But the reason for that is we're in memory mode. So what you want to do is you want to hit the VFO button and then hit the band button. And now you'll change between things like 220 where you can listen, you can transmit, UHF, 500 megahertz. You'll get all the way down to the air bands as well. So that's kind of nice. Listen, maybe something going on in the air bands. I don't know. But as long as you're in VFO mode and you hit this band button, you're going to be able to go in between different frequency ranges. Kind of nice to know. And finally, actually, let me go back into memory mode here just to be in there. But finally, I did want to mention a couple other things too, and let's go into the main menu. Now, this tutorial is only for analog programming today, and my next tutorial is going to be about digital programming, so don't get too worked up about it, but if you do know analog programming, it should be pretty easy to figure out digital on your own. Again, there'll be a video if you need help. But anyway, we're back in the menu now, and I do want to make note of a couple of my favorite little features on this radio here. So let me go back to option 1, and we kind of already mentioned, your call sign is 64, but there's this option, number 2, which is automatic power off. Now, I enable this on the radio on every one of my radios because, especially with the Yaesu FT-70D, a lot of people are complaining This radio's battery life is horrible. Okay, well, so now we're in the menu and we're on option 2 and we tap that function button and it says my automatic power off is off. But if I could set it to like 30 minutes or an hour where there's no activity, it'll just shut the radio off for me. Kind of conserve some of that battery. And then if we actually go over to step, let's see what it is, DC voltage 12. This is nice here, this DC voltage, because if you hit it, you'll see what your current battery DC voltage is. You'll get an idea how much maybe charge you have left or how much juice you have left in the battery. So that's a cool little feature to know, especially because generally there's not a battery life indicator on the front panel of the Yaesu FT-70. Back into the menu here, and if we continue to scroll, yeah, there's just a bunch of stuff. You could basically adjust like your LCD screen and everything like that as well. I did mention all these shortcuts, and all these shortcuts can be found in the main menu as well. So it's just something to be looking out for. You can set a password on your radio if you want. But anyway, today we discussed some of the features of the Yaesu FT-70D in a little more depth, and then how to program this radio for analog channels. And like I mentioned, in the future here, we're going to do the digital channels, and then we're going to do how to program this radio via the computer. So don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you're alerted when I make videos. And until next time, we'll see you soon. This is W9FFF Ham Radio Dude 73.